So we're going to be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 6, verse number 37. Ekanta labhang vachasonupungsang sushloka maulher gunavadam ahuhu shrutescha vidvadbir upakritayam kata sudayam upasamprayogam ekantalabhang vachasonupungsang sushloka mauler gunavadam ahuhu Shrutescha vidvadbir upakritayam kata sudayam upasamprayogam. Padmapriya Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Eka anta, the one which has no comparison. Labham, gain. Vachasaha, by discussions. Nu pumsam, after the Supreme Person. Sushloka, pious. Mauleha, activities. Gunavadam, glorification. Ahuhu, it is so said. Shrutehe, of the year. Cha, also. Vidvat bihi, by the learned. Upakrutayam, being so edited. Katha Sudayam, in the nectar of such a traditional message. Upasamprayogam serves the real purpose, being nearer to. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Translation and purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the great learned sages that the actual purpose of the year is served just by being near them. Purport. The impersonalists are very much afraid of hearing the activities of the Lord because they think that the happiness derived from the transcendental situation of Brahman is the ultimate goal of life. They think that anyone's activity, even that of the personality of Godhead, is mundane. But the idea of happiness indicated in this verse is different because it relates to the activities of the Supreme Personality who has transcendental qualities. The word Gunavadam is significant because the qualities of the Lord and his activities and pastimes are the subject matter for the discussions of devotees. A rishi like Maitreya is certainly not interested in discussing anything pertaining to mundane qualities. Yet, he says that the highest perfectional stage of transcendental realization is to discuss the Lord's activities. Srila Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that topics regarding the transcendental activities of the Lord are far beyond the transcendental realization of Kaivalya happiness. These transcendental activities of the Lord are so arranged in writing by the great sages that simply by hearing of those narrations, one becomes perfectly self-realized, and the proper use of the ear and the tongue is also achieved. Srimad Bhagavatam is one of such great literatures, and the highest perfectional state of life is attained simply by hearing and reciting its contents. So, beautiful verse here, where here he says, the highest perfectional gain of humanity. Right? What is the highest perfectional gain of humanity? He says to engage in discussions of the activities and glories, which means we are hearing. In discussions, what are we hearing? We are hearing about the activities and glories of the pious actor. So here the word pious actor refers to the Supreme Lord. Right? And then such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by who? The greatly learned sages. And that the actual purpose of the year is served just by being near them. There's this wonderful verse, another verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't remember the verse exactly. But it talks like how the ears are just like the holes where the snakes enter. Unless it is used for the purpose of hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What happens if the snakes enter the ear and the holes? Basically, the snake never makes a hole because it's not capable of making a hole. It is the rat which makes the hole. And what does the snake do? The snake enters into the hole, eats the rat and lives there. So which means that the snake is of nonsense topics, right? Don't naturally, find a good residence like the ear. But if we invite those topics, how? Simply by the desire that we have like rats inside us. Then what happens? These snakes enter inside Uh, by that invitation, what happens is that the snakes eat the rats, which means eat ourselves, eat our soul. Soul in the sense, eat our, good things, and then we become completely destroyed. Right. So here it says the very purpose, the actual purpose of the ear is served just by hearing, just by being near them. That is, why does it say? Actually, when I was reading, I was just reading just by hearing them. Now, actually, here Srila Prabhupada says by being near them. Why does he say that by being near them? Which means if you are near them, they don't have any other thing that to do than simply discuss the topics of the Lord. Katayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Katayantascha mam nityam. 24 hours they are interested only in discussing about the wonderful topics of the Supreme Lord, the pious actor, right? And so if you simply are near to them, we see the whole beautiful story of Narada Muni, once first canto, 6th chapter, where he says he was simply near them when these great Bhakti Vedantas were discussing. And simply by hearing such topics, what happened? He attained the highest perfectional stage of prema. The whole discussion about Narada Muni is about that, as to how simply by hearing to the, or simply being near to them. So being near to them gives us two benefits, in fact. What is the one benefit? The one benefit is to simply hear. The other benefit is also to serve them. And by serving them, we also get their uchishta. Chishta means their, their remnants of their food, which is the highest thing that I got, is what Narada Muni says. That just because I got that, I was able to become what I am today. And that is the answer that he gives to Vyasadeva. So the highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. And one such wonderful writing by the greatly learned sages is the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport. Right in the second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that is being declared. That Mahamunit krute kimva parair ishvara sadyo hrudi avaruddhate atra pratibhihi susrushru vitakshanat. He says, when the great Mahamuni, the greatest of the sages, has given, what did he give? This Srimad Bhagavatam. Kimva paraihi, there is no necessity for any other literature. This one literature is enough. So, the conclusion is that simply by hearing to Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the greatest of all the great literatures, one can attain the highest perfectional state of life. That is the conclusion, right? However, the impersonalists are not interested because they simply see happiness only in the Brahma. Just in the Brahmananda, they are very happy. They think there is no happiness beyond that. But it is only the devotees who are able to understand. Why? Because they are able to see that the activities of the Lord are not on the same category as the activities of mundane people. They understand, Krishna says, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, that the activities, the birth and everything about the Lord is divya, is not mundane, it is transcendental. And because they appreciate the transcendental nature of the Lord, then they appreciate the activities of the Lord. Because simply to hear about the activities of somebody else only creates enviousness in the material world. Or something that is mundane. If you hear about something, what does it happen? Every day we hear news. In news, what happens? There's so much news about this person, did this person that. This person became very successful. This person made more money. This person became more famous, and so on and so forth. But when we see that, what happens? Only enviousness goes up. Why I am not able to get? When these, when we look at them, we say, when these fools can become so good, why I am not able to, become that? That enviousness comes. But that is not so with the devotees, because they appreciate that the Supreme Lord's activities are not on the same level as the mundane activities, and they are divya. And by hearing such activities, what happens is Punarjanmanaiti mameti. So Arjuna, he says that one does not have to come, which is the ultimate goal. And so here he says, the ultimate goal of life is attained. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. And that is given by the learned sages. And so what we should do, the very purpose is to simply live near them. And that's the very purpose. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Susrusho Shraddha Dhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchihi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipraha. Mahat, these great devotees, these great sages, the great learned, Vipraha, they are greatly learned sages. Mahat Vipraha. Their Vipra means they are learned, Mahat means they are great sages. They are Mahans, Mahabhagavatas. Sevaya means to serve them. So by being near them means not simply standing near them. We have to serve them. So I remember one day I was sitting, I want to be near my Guru Maharaj. So when he was giving Bhagavatam class, I was very proudly sitting next to him. He was sitting in his Vyasasana. All the devotees are sitting in front of him, but I was sitting next to him, next his side, but below the Vyasasana. I thought, okay, if Guru Maharaj wants something, I can give him. Maybe he'll ask for kartal, maybe he'll ask for water or something, I can give him. So in that idea, I was sitting there. And then Guru Maharaj was giving class. And as usual, my mind was going in 100 different places, sitting there. What is happening? What will happen? It's just going in 100 different places. And then suddenly Guru Maharaj was saying about some topic and he quoted one sloka. And then he looked at me and says, what is the next part of the sloka? I was blinking because my attention was not there. My attention was in something else. I was wanting to, I thought he was asking something, water or something. So suddenly when he asked sloka, my mind is blank. Then he finished that particular, whatever he was talking, and then he bent towards me and he said, if you're going to be sitting here, you should know this. Otherwise, why are you sitting here? It felt like, he threw a little nuclear bomb on me. Like the class is going on. Everybody is looking at it. And I'm so proud disciple sitting there. But when he said this, everybody know the sequence of what was going on. He asked me something and I didn't know. And then he chastised me. It was very hard to the heart. But such chastisement is good because when your guru chastises, then he also gives you the blessings that, then he gives you the empowerment to also know, the subject matter, which means when he chastises, he says, okay, I'm chastising you now, you know all these scriptures, because if you want to be sitting here, which means you are interested in sitting here, I will enable you. So he empowers you and he blesses you. That's always the thing, right? But of course, at that time, I was not able to understand that. I said, oh, my Guru Maharaj, he chastised me so badly. So it's like that. So sitting near them means not just sitting near them to just show off, oh, I'm special disciple, I'm a secretary. That's not what it means. It means that we have to serve them. So it says, Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipraha. Then what happens is the result is Vasudeva Katharuchihi. Then we'll get taste for hearing Vasudeva Katha. But when we are sitting near him and serving him, there are two important qualities. Susruso Shraddha Dhanas. Shraddha should be there. Faith has to be there. Oh, I'm hearing, this is a great Mahan, I have to hear from him. Not only in him, but also in the topic that is being heard. Both, there should be faith. Susrushuhu means full attentiveness should be there. If these two are there, then one will get taste for Vasudeva Katha Ruchi. So he says, Susrusho Shraddha Dhanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchi Syan Mahatsevaya Vipraha Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. He says, so the purpose of going to Punya Tirthas is to be always near these greatly learned sages. By being near them, we can serve them. By serving them, they will be speaking some katha. When we hear to that katha, then what happens? That katha is in the subject matter of the activities and glories of the pious actor. And when we hear that katha, what does it give? It gives us the highest perfectional gain of humanity. That is the point. Verse number 38. Atmano avasito vatsa mahima kavinadhina Sangvatsara sahasrante dhiya yoga vipakkhaya.
Mataji, you go. Me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mataji.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Atmanaha of the Supreme Soul, Avasitaha known, Vatsa, O my dear son, Mahima, glories, Kavina, by the poet Brahma, Adina, original, Samvatsara, celestial years, Shahasra Ante, at the end of 1000, Dhiya, by intelligence, Yoga, Vipakkaya, by matured meditation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Oh, my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. After 1000 years of meditation, what did he know? He did not know the glories of the Supreme Soul. He only knew that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. It's not easy to understand. That is so much. Manusyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvatah. To understand about the glories of the Supreme Lord is not easy. Only hardly one knows me in truth, which means it's so difficult to know. So he says. So it does not mean that Brahma cannot know. Of course, Brahma can know because he's the the guru of our sampradaya. So he definitely knows. But it says that even for Brahma, it's so difficult and inconceivable. So we can understand how difficult it is for us. And there are some froggish philosophers who want to know the Supreme Soul by means of philosophy and mental speculation. And when the devotees who are to some extent in knowledge of the Supreme Lord admit that the glories of the Lord are inestimable or inconceivable, the froggish philosophers adversely criticize them. These philosophers, like the frog in the well, who try to estimate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean, like to take trouble over fruitless mental speculation instead of taking instructions from devotees like the original poet, namely Brahma. Lord Brahma underwent a severe type of meditation for 1000 celestial years, yet he said that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. Therefore, what can the froggish philosophers hope to gain from their mental speculations? So, Brahma says that Pantastu koti satavatsara sampragamyo vayo ratapi manaso munipungavana. These munipungavas, if they try to do mental speculation and try to understand avichinta tattve, they cannot understand. So that's the conclusion. So it is said in the Brahma Samhita that the mental speculator may fly, so Prabhupada quotes that, may fly through the sky of speculation with the velocity of wind. Vayorapi Manasor, or mind or the wind, for thousands of millions of years, and still he will find it inconceivable. The devotees, however, do not waste time in such vain searching after knowledge of the Supreme, but they submissively hear the glories of the Lord from bona fide devotees. They hear the glories of the Lord from the bona fide devotees, but how submissively? That is what is important. Thus, they transcendently enjoy the process of hearing and chanting. The Lord approves of the devotional activities of the devotees or of Mahatmas, and he says, Mahatmanastu tumam partha dhaivim prakrutam mashrita bhajanti ananna manaso gyatva bhutadim apyam satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridhavritaha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. The pure devotees of the Lord take shelter of the Para Prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord, called Lakshmi Devi or Sita Devi or Srimati Radharani or Srimati Rukmini Devi, and thus they become actual Mahatmas or great souls. Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculation, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary process of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. So here he says Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculation, which means they don't like to take their own ways. They simply follow in the path. And how do they follow in that path? He says they take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. They don't try to manufacture their own form of devotional service. They simply follow in the steps. Mahajanas ena gata supanta. There are Mahajanas and they have followed a particular path. They will simply follow in that same path. They will not manufacture their own way of doing devotional service. In fact, Rupa Goswami says that trying to do that, Shruti, Smriti, Puranadi, Pancharatra, Vidimbina, Aikantiki, Horer Bhakti, Utpataiva Kalpate, he says. That is, if somebody does not follow, just like how it has been described in the Shruti, Smriti, Puranas and the Itihasas and the uh, Pancharatra Vidhis and everything, if somebody does not follow that, and if he manufactures his own type of religion, meaning, oh, I will do like this, sometimes even in Krishna consciousness, right? We try to do things according to our own, we try to speculate things. I will do like this, I will do like that. We try to manufacture. Even when we are doing deity worship, we try, deity worship is done in a certain way, and it has been given in the Pancharatras, how to do deity worship and so on. Sometimes we should not become sentimental and do deity worship according to our own whims and fancies. There are certain rules and regulations that are given as to how one should do deity worship. And we have to simply follow that. We cannot become sentimental in the sense that sometimes we also see, I'm just giving an example, not to criticize or anything. Sometimes there is a Independence Day or something, we try to dress the deities in the color of the flag or something like that. Tomorrow is a good example. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So I see that in some places they will decorate Radha and Krishna like a Valentine with hearts everywhere. There's no such description of Valentines in the scriptures. Simply trying to speculate and do things just because you want to attract some people, that's not the way to be doing it. Of course, some devotees might do it out of love. Oh, okay, we will attract some, youngsters. They will come. They will also be happy to see Radha Krishna. Maybe, but that is a little bit of speculation. It was never appreciated by the acharyas. So we have to simply follow in the footsteps of the acharyas, right? Otherwise, he says utpataiva kalpate. It simply becomes a false. It's fake, or it's utpat means basically you can say a fall down, or a deviation, you can say, right? So Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculations. They want to follow it without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary process of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. This transcendental method practiced by the Mahatmas gives them sufficient knowledge of the Lord, because if the Lord can at all be known to some extent, it is only through the means of devotional service and no other way. One may go on speculating and waste the valuable time of his human life, but that will not help anyone to enter into the precincts of the Lord. The Mahatmas, however, are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about his glorious activities in his transcendental dealings with his devotees or with the demons. The devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and the life after. Srila Prabhupada says, very interesting, he says, the devotees take pleasure in both. What? In the dealings of the Lord with his devotees or with the demons. Right? Because they know ultimately the Lord's dealings with his demons or devotees is the same, because he is going to benedict them with something. He's never going to harm. It might look like, once, I remember I was leaving office early, and I was telling my colleague, I have to go early today. He said, why are you going so early today? I said, today is an important function, so I have to go and attend the function. I said, what is the function? He says, today is Narsinga Chaturdasi. There's a nice Abhishek. Then he asked me a very strange question. He says, what kind of a function is that you celebrate? Your Narshinga is, killing somebody, and he's ripping out everything from his abdomen, and, he's killing someone, and you're celebrating that. Is that a great thing to celebrate? What kind of a God is your God? He asked me this question right on my face, and I'm leaving. I'm already late. I have to go there for Abhishekam at 6 o'clock, and I have to be there. So he's asking me this question. So anyway, I thought, let me sit down and explain to him. And I told him that Do you have any idea about who this demon is and who this Lord is and who? So, what do you think about a father creating so much havoc to his own son? Like he wanted to send serpents and he wants to throw him on up top of the hill, and then he wanted to send some poison, and he, was cooking him in literally uh, in a hot environment, and then he, so many things. He sent elephants and every other means by which he could kill his own son. What do you think about his father? What kind of a father is he? He said, what does such a father deserve? He deserves to be killed. And that's exactly what my Lord did. Is there a problem? So then he understood that, oh, yeah, there's a thing behind. So most people do not understand what is behind and simply tend to conclude or judge, about a particular Lord, not even wanting to know. They just look at something and then they come to a conclusion thinking that, oh, this is how your Lord is, what kind of a Lord is. Your Lord asked your, his disciple or his friend to go and fight and kill people. What kind of a Lord is your Lord in Bhagavad Gita? People ask such questions, but they have no clue or idea about what is the thing behind it, the scene behind it. And when they understand that, they'll be able to appreciate it. Now, the problem is with our mundane eyes and ears and intelligence, we will only be able to know what happened in front of us, even if we are close to them. But we do not know what happened in the past before this lifetime and what is going to happen in the future in the next lifetimes. Maybe the past lifetimes at least is recorded somewhere. Somebody could verify it. But what is going to happen in the future, nobody has an idea. But the Supreme Lord has an idea about everything that happened in the past, that is happening in presently, and what is going to happen in the future. So who could be a better decision maker than the Supreme Lord? And so we have complete faith in him, whatever he does. And that's the knowledge that one receives. And that's how the devotees come to a conclusion that the Lord's janma, karma, and everything, his paraphernalia, everything is, his devotees, everything is transcendental. Just by looking at his janma, that he doesn't have any janma, that itself makes it transcendental, right? Because he's not born, he was always there. So if he was always there, he knew everything. Like, for example, if there is somebody who's in the company for like 30 years, 40 years, whatever he says, people will believe because, Baba has been there for like 30, 40 years in the company. He knows practically from the day one the company was established till today. He's literally the walking library of our company. So the Lord has been there, Purana Purusham, Adhyam Purana Purusham. He's been right there and he is beginningless. So obviously he is the best person to bet on. So the devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and life after. Text number 39. Ato Bhagavato Maya Mayinam Api Mohini Yat Swayang Chatma Vartmatma Naveda Kim Utapare.
Hare Krishna. Atha, therefore, Bhagavataha godly, Maya potencies, Mayinam of the jugglers, Api even, Mohini enchanting, Yat that which, Swayam personally, Cha also, Atmavatma self-sufficient, Atma self, Na does not, Veda no, Kim what, Uta to speak of, Apare others.
Hare Krishna. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others. The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. Jugglers means basically the mental speculators or the mental jugglers or the word jugglers, or essentially the ones who grammatically juggle the Vedic, knowledge. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord. Even the Lord himself does not know his own potency. And to know that potency is why he took his avatar as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, what part of that my potency that Radharani appreciates, that I do not understand? I want to know that potency. So he says, okay, I will come as a devotee. Then I will understand, right? So that potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord. So it is certainly unknown to others. If he does not know, then nobody else knows. The froggish philosophers and mundane wranglers in science and mathematical calculation may not believe in the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but They are sometimes puzzled by the wonderful jugglery of man and nature. Such jugglers and magicians of the mundane world are actually puzzled by the jugglery of the Lord in his transcendental activities, but they try to adjust their bewilderment by saying that it is all mythology. There is, however, nothing impossible or mythological in the supreme omnipotent person. This word mythology, myth, means it's not real. Generally, when we refer to the past activities or the leelas of the Lord, we refer to sometimes in English as mythology. These are mythological books, and it is actually wrong. They are not mythology. They are real happenings. They are not just some kind of a fiction, like they have these science fiction stories or anything like that. They are not fictions. They are real. So here Srila Prabhupada points out about how we simply get away because we do not have faith that these things are possible, and we do not have faith in the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. We simply adjust their bewilderment by saying that it is all mythology. There is, however, nothing impossible or mythological in the supreme omnipotent person. There's nothing impossible for the Lord. The most wonderful puzzle for the mundane wranglers is that while they remain calculating the length and breadth of the unlimited potency of the Supreme Person, his faithful devotees are set free from the bondage of material engagement simply by appreciating the wonderful jugglery of the Supreme in the practical field. Very beautiful. He says, the most wonderful puzzle for the mundane wranglers is that while they remain calculating the length and breadth of the unlimited potency of the Supreme Person, which means when they are sitting here trying to calculate everything, in that time there are hundreds of thousands of devotees who have faith, who are taking up to thinking that yes, the Lord is always a puzzle, and then they're walking off. The classic example is the story that I used to say, right? The Brahmana who asked Narada Muni as to what the Lord is doing. He said, how is it possible that the elephant could go inside the eye of a needle? But the cobbler had complete faith that yes, it is possible for the Lord. When he can insert such a big tree under which I have been sitting all my life into this one seed that is sitting in front of me, why is it not possible for the Lord to insert an elephant into the eye of a needle? That was his conclusion, right? So that is exactly the point. The point is that his faithful devotees are set free from the bondage of material engagement simply by appreciating the wonderful jugglery of the Supreme in the practical field. The devotees of the Lord see the wonderful dexterity in everything which they come in contact, in all circumstances of eating, sleeping, working, etc. A small banyan fruit contains thousands of small seeds. Prabhupada gives the example. And each seed holds the potency of another tree, which again holds the potency of many millions of such fruits as causes and effects. So, the trees and seeds engage the devotees in meditation about the activities of the Lord, while the mundane wranglers waste time in dry speculation and mental concoction, which are fruitless in both this life and the next. In spite of their pride in speculation, they can never appreciate the simple activities of the banyan tree's potency. Such speculators are poor souls destined to remain in matter perpetually. Right? They will always be here. Text number 40. Yato prapya nivartanta vachascha manasa saha ahang chanya ime devas tasmai bhagavate namaha.
Hare Krishna, Dandavad Pranams.
Yes,
Yataha, from whom, aprapya, being unable to measure. Nyavartana, cease to try. Vachaha, words. Cha, also. Manasa, with the mind. Saha, with. Aham cha, also the ego. Anye, other. Ime, all these. Devaha, demigods. Tasmai, unto him. Bhagavate, unto the personality of Godhead. Namaha, offer obeisances. Hare Krishna.
right. Translation. Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says words, mind, and ego with their respective controlling demigods. It's not just words, mind, and ego that can explain the Supreme Lord. Even if the rulers of those come, they will not be able to understand. That is the nature of the Supreme. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. A froggish calculator may raise the objection that if the absolute is unknowable even by the controlling deities of speech, mind, and ego, namely the Vedas, Brahma, Rudra, and all the demigods, headed by Brihaspati, then why should the devotees be so interested in this unknown object? The answer is that the transcendental ecstasy enjoyed by the devotees in delineating the pastimes of the Lord is certainly unknown to non devotees and mental speculators. Unless one relishes transcendental joy, naturally one will come back from his speculations and concocted conclusions because he will see them as neither factual nor enjoyable. The devotees can at least know that the absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of God and Vishnu, as the Vedic hymns confirms, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sada Pashyanti Surya. Also confirms 15:15 that Vedaischa Sarve Rahameva Vedyaha. By culture of Vedic knowledge, one must know Lord Krishna and should not falsely speculate on the word aham or I. The only method for understanding the supreme truth is devotional service, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvatah. Only by devotional service can one know that the ultimate truth is the personality of Godhead and that Brahman and Paramatma are only his partial features. This is confirmed in this verse by the great sage Maitreya. With devotion, he offers sincere surrender, namaha, to the Supreme Personality of God at Bhagavate. One has to follow in the footsteps of the great sages and devotees like Maitreya and Vidura, Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami, and engage in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. If one would know his ultimate feature, which is above Brahman and Paramatma. So essentially, the conclusion of this chapter, this is the last verse. So thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the third canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Creation of the Universal Form. The conclusion is that one has to approach the inconceivable and unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead only through the process of devotional service. If one takes help of the speech, mind, and ego, whose devatas are the Vedas, Brahma, Rudra, and all the demigods headed by Brihaspati, it is not possible to understand. Now the question is, if they cannot understand, why should the devotees understand? Because here he says, the answer is that the transcendental ecstasy enjoyed by the devotees in delineating the pastimes of the Lord is certainly unknown. Simply trying to, by devotional service, trying to appreciate the original nature of the Lord in his originality, which means not trying to find how is it possible. Instead of that, they always think, yes, it is possible because he is the Supreme Lord. There is nothing that is not possible by the Supreme Lord. And when they think about it, they simply appreciate it. And they feel great happiness from that. That happiness cannot be gotten by anybody who is not a devotee or mental speculator. So unless one relishes transcendental joy, naturally, one will come back from his speculations and concocted conclusions because he will see them as neither factual nor enjoyable. So what happens when he hears to something about the Lord and when he does not see that it is factual? Then what he does is he mentally speculates, how is this possible? He is saying this, how can a little boy, who is just 7 years old, lift a mountain and in his little finger on his left hand, and he can hold it for 7 days and 7 nights. It's practically impossible. Even the Hercules who, lifted the globe cannot do it. For 7 days and 7 nights is impossible. Then you can sit and speculate and conclude on that. But for somebody who knows that, oh, he is that Supreme Lord who created all these planets, and all these planets are just flying or, being descended in the sky, and they are sitting there for millions and trillions of years just like that, and they don't move one position that they clash between each other and create havoc. Now that Supreme Lord, for him to carry one small mountain in that one small planet of his billions of Brahmandas, is that very difficult? No, it's not difficult. That is devotees thinking. Because they know that this Lord, who is that little boy of 7 years, is that original Lord Govinda, who is Sarvakaranaka. They know that. Because they know that fact, they can understand that it is possible by him. Otherwise, they cannot understand. They will only look at it, oh, how can a 7-year-old boy, and that too a coward boy, they can even think, oh, he's a vegetarian, he's not even eating, he's just eating thair sadam, how is it possible for him to lift? They can think in all that directions. So that is not possible, right? So thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 3rd canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Creation of the Universal Form. Chapter 7, further inquiries by Vidura. Going to give it a little pause if there is any questions before I proceed. Anybody has any questions? I believe not. Text number 1, Sri Sukha Uvacha. Evang Bhruvanam Maitreyang Dvaipayana Suto Buddha Prinayan Iva Bharatyam Viduraha Pratyabhashata.
Hare Krishna. Sri Shuka Vacha, Sri Shukadev Goswami said, Evam, thus, Bhruvanam speaking, Maitreyam unto the sage Maitreya, Dwapayana Sutaha, the son of Dwapayana, Buddha learned, Pranayan in a pleasing manner.
Prinayan.
Pranayan in a pleasing manner, Eva as it was, Bhartiya in the manner of a request, Vidura, Pratyabhashasata expressed direction.
Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, while Maitreya the great sage was thus speaking, Vidura, the learned son of Dvaipayana Vyasa, expressed a request in a pleasing manner by asking this question. So, which means he further asked some questions for him to get some answers. Vidura Vacha, text number 2. Brahman Katang Bhagavatas Chin Matrasya Vikharinaha Leelaya Chapi Yujyeran Nirgunasya Gunaha Kriyaha.
Shall I, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji.
Vidura Uvacha. Vidura said, Brahman, O Brahmana, Katham, how? Bhagavataha, the personality of Godhead, Chit Matrasya, of the complete spiritual whole, Avikarinaha, of the unchangeable, Leelaya, by his pastime, Cha, either, Api, even though it is so, Yujyeran, take place, Nirgunasya, who is without the modes of nature, Gunaha, modes of nature, Kriyaha, activities. Thank you, Prabhu.
Translation, Sri Vidura said, O great Brahmana, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, how is he connected with the material modes of nature and their activities? If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? So essentially the question is, says, since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the complete spiritual whole and is unchangeable, which means he is the same original person. But when he comes into this material world, he does various pastimes. Like, for example, he looks like a little boy and then he grows, which means his body is changing. But you're saying that nothing is changing for him. His body is the same. Everything is the same. So how do we understand that? That's the question. If this is his pastime, how do the activities of the unchangeable take place and exhibit qualities without the modes of nature? So usually the growth of the body and everything is all due to the modes of nature, right? But the Lord also makes changes in his body. He's a little boy and then he grows and then he's 7 years old. We just discussed. He's three years old when he was killing Tranavrata and so on and so forth. So he's also growing. It is changing. So how are you saying that it is not changing? So how do we understand this? That's the question. As described in the previous chapter, the difference between the super soul, the Supreme Lord, and the living entities is that the activities of the Lord in creating the cosmic manifestation are performed by the Lord through the agency of his multifarious energies. But this manifestation is bewildering to the living entities. Now, when the Lord creates everything, which means the cosmic manifestation of this material world, because that is the topic of discussion of how the universal form came and things like that, he doesn't do it directly. He does it through his multifarious energies. Ekam sena sthito jagat. He simply expands into one part of his energy, and that energy expands into multifarious energies, and then the whole manifestation is, but this is bewildering to the living entity, how it can happen. The Lord is therefore the master of the energies, whereas the living entities are subjugated by them. By asking various questions about transcendental activities, Vidura is clearing the misconception that when the Lord either descends to the earth in his incarnation or appears himself with all his potencies, he too is subjected to the influence of Maya, just like an ordinary living entity. This is generally the calculation of less intelligent philosophers who consider the position of the Lord and that of the living entities to be on the same level. Vidura is hearing the great sage Maitreya refute these arguments. The Lord is described in this verse as Chinmatra, or completely spiritual. The personality of Godhead has unlimited potencies to create and manifest many wonderful things, both temporary and permanent. Because this material world is the creation of his external energy, it thus appears to be temporary. It is manifested at certain intervals, maintained for some time, and again dissolved and conserved in his own energy, as described in 8:19 Bhagavad Gita, Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate. But the creation of his internal potency, the spiritual world, is not a temporary manifestation like the material world, but is eternal and full of transcendental knowledge, opulence, energy, strength, beauty, and glory. Such manifestation of the Lord's potencies are eternal and therefore called nirguna, or free of all tinges of modes of material nature. So the word nirguna, one has to understand clearly, is that it is guna. Nirguna means no characteristics or no. It is not influenced by the three gunas of this material world. That is what it essentially means. So even up to the mode of material goodness. So one should not think that the Lord is mode of goodness. No, he is beyond the mode of goodness also. Since the supreme and the spiritual world is transcendental even to material goodness and thus is unchangeable, since the supreme Lord of such eternal and unchangeable qualities is never subjugated by anything like material influence, how can his activities and form be conceived to be under the influence of illusory Maya, as is the case with the living entities? That is the question. So, of course, the answer is what is going to be the following verses that come after this. So, a juggler or magician displays many wonders with his acts and arts. He can become a cow by his magical tactics, and yet he is not the cow. But at the same time, the cow displayed by the magician is not different from him. Similarly, the material potency is not different from the Lord because it is an emanation from him. But at the same time, that manifestation of potency is not the supreme Lord. The Lord's transcendental knowledge and potency always remains the same. They do not change, even when displayed in the material world. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord descends to the earth by his own internal potency, and therefore there is no question of his becoming materially contaminated, changed, or otherwise affected by the modes of material nature. Now, simply because the Lord comes in a particular form, it is the same Supreme Lord, he comes in a particular form, that does not mean that he changes. But he changes. That is inconceivable. Why? Because our change is a forced change. Whereas the Lord's change is not a forced change. Nobody can force. Now, who in this material world forces the change? The energy of the Supreme Lord in his form as Maya. Yantra arudhani mayaya, he says. A living entity is inserted into an yantra or a body, a particular body, by the agency of Maya. And who is that Maya? Maya dhyakshena prakriti. That Maya is acting under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. Now, somebody who is acting under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, how can that entity control the controller? It's not possible. So, in that sense, the Supreme Lord can never be controlled by Maya. So, the conclusion is that the changes that he makes is not because of the force that is made by the Maya, but it is out of his own free will. That is the understanding. So the restrictions of so here, the Lord is Saguna by his own internal potency. But at the same time, he is Nirguna, since he is not in touch with the material energy. The restrictions of the prison house are applicable to the prisoners who are condemned by the king's law. So now, Srila Prabhupada gives an example. What is the example? Now there is a prison house. In the prison house, there is a warden. And there is also the king. The king sometimes visits the prison house. Does it mean that he also becomes a prisoner because he came into the prison? No. He is just come to relieve he's just looking at who are the good prisoners so that I can relieve him in the next round of relief that I want to give. That does not make him a prisoner just because he entered the prison house, right? So the point is that, so the restrictions of the prison house are applicable to the prisoners who are condemned by the king's law, but the king is never affected by such implications, although he may visit the prison house out of his goodwill. Is in the Vishnu Purana, the 6 opulences of the Lord are stated to be non-different from him. The opulences of transcendental knowledge, strength, opulence, potency, beauty, and renunciation are all identical with the personality of Godhead. When he personally displays such opulences in the material world, they have no connection with the modes of material nature. So what does it mean? Krishna has these 6 opulences: Aishwarya, Virya, Yasha, Sriya, Jnana, Vairagya. Now immediately we should not compare these things with us. Oh, Krishna is also beautiful, I am also beautiful. The Miss Universe or Mr. Universe should not think I am also beautiful, he is also beautiful. It is nothing to do with beauty. Why we should not think like that? Maybe that Mr. Universe, the little boy who is 16 years old or 18 years old who became the Mr. Universe, is beautiful. But he cannot be ever beautiful. He will be replaced by another Mr. Universe that the very next year itself. He cannot continue to be the Mr. Universe. That's the problem. But the Supreme Lord is Navayavanam Cha. He is always beautiful. He is always attractive. He can never become anything less than beautiful. That is the Supreme Lord. That is the differentiating factor between a permanent and a non-permanent or a temporary living entity. So he is Chinmatratva. That is what's the explanation. So when he personally displays such opulences in the material world, they have no connection with the modes of material nature. The very word Chinmatratva is the guarantee that the Lord's activities are always transcendental, even when displayed in the material world. His activities are as good as the Supreme Personality himself, otherwise liberated devotees like Sukadeva Goswami would not have been attracted by them. Vidura inquired how the Lord's activities can be in the modes of material nature, as is sometimes miscalculated by the persons with a poor fund of knowledge. The inebriety of the material qualities is due to the difference between the material body and the spirit soul. The conditioned soul's activities are displayed through the medium of the modes of material nature and are therefore perverted in appearance. We have a body, Krishna also has a body, but our body is different from Krishna's body. Our body's activities are a perverted reflection of the ultimate activity of what is in the spiritual world, right? However, the Lord's body and the Lord himself are one and the same. One and the same meaning that they are of the same nature. They are both spirit. They are not mundane. And when the Lord's activities are displayed, they are certainly non-different from the Lord in all respects. The conclusion is that persons who consider the Lord's activities material are certainly mistaken. That is the conclusion. Because they do not understand the transit. That's why the one statement that Krishna makes is that one who understands Janma Karma Chame Divyam, that it is transcendental, that is enough. That's the ultimate understanding that one can get. Hari Om Tat Sat. Jai Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Gaur Bhakta Bindu ki jai, Bona Mangal Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.